Hello everybody, it's your favorite West Virginia on Space here, and Thanos. Thanos, the big purple boy, the big chungus of the Marvel MCU until he died and then the MCU floundered. But ultimately, he was a character that had been hyped up for a while. Now, in the comics, he's a lot different. As in, he doesn't really have much of a reason for doing what he's doing except for he's evil and he wants to be with death. I'm not even joking. But in the movies, they gave him a slightly different backstory. The movies being, of course, that blah, 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 his planet died or whatever, and then he wants to wipe out half of all life in the universe to keep from killing all of it. At least is what he says. And fundamentally, that kind of works as a villain motivation. I thought he was an okay villain. He was perfectly good for what he did. I didn't really care for him much, but he did what he did, and I can't complain. However, the internet seemed to collectively decide differently that he was actually this misunderstood hero. And I'm sorry, but were we watching the same movie? Because he's not. His plan is terrible, his motives are horrible, and he's just kind of a, well, he's evil. Like, unabashedly evil. Like, but we'll get into that for today's video. First of all, we have to ask some basic questions here of his motivation. Now, of course, his motivation is that his home planet, that blah, 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 there wasn't enough resources on his home planet for them to survive, so he's just killing half of all people in some kind of lottery, but they didn't approve, and they all died, and he survived. Okay, we all saw the movie. However, there's some holes even at the start here, mainly being how? Like, how does this villain line up exactly? Now, I could have missed something, maybe I did, but like, why did they all die? They have spaceships or other things they could have done. And why are you the sole survivor? Maybe I missed it, but like, it does feel a bit weird, isn't it? Like, shouldn't logically someone survive other than him? But yet, he did somehow. And if they had space travel, presumably which is what Thanos would need to escape and survive, if they had some kind of war, then why didn't no one else take this option? Why are you the sole survivor? Question, and you might say, oh, but he used the stones to show what the world was like. Well, he could have just been putting up an illusion. I mean, once again, as far as I can tell in the movies, it's entirely possible that he blew up that planet and then just tried to convince Doctor Strange otherwise. But of course, that's just a personal thing I've always been slightly bothered by. But okay, let's just say he was right in this specific case. We have to acknowledge what he's doing is horrible. Like, this isn't just like, la-di-da-di-da, I'm doing something that you don't like. His plan is to murder half of all life. You do understand that at best, his plan will result in 50% of all life dying. That is not very good. Under stuff like the trolley problem, this doesn't look good. Like, you would have to be certain that your plan is going to save the other 0.5% for even your morality to vaguely check out. And even if it did, would it be worth it to do something so irreparably horrible? Like, tons of death. Like, do we understand? Like, people seem to forget this. It wasn't like these people just disappeared, like, oh, well, you died. It's like, no, you're dead. Rip, dead, out of here, goodbye. Like, that is awful. Like, most people would say that if you kill one person without a very good reason, then you're a monster. What is killing half of all life in the universe? Destroying families from apart from each other? How many children are going to grow up without their mothers or their fathers in his plan? How many people are going to lose their spouses? How many siblings are going to be broken forever? How many, like, parents are going to have to watch their children die in their arms because Big Thanos said they had to? Like, that's just awful. Objectively horrible. And people seem to forget that when talking about him. His plan at best is awful. Half of all life will die. But it gets even worse when you realize his plan has some fatal flaws. Thanos' plan is, of course, heavily flawed when looked into with any real degree of logic. First things first, well, it doesn't really matter because most life isn't bottom feeders. Most life eats other life. This is fundamental. You've seen the food chain argument or the food web, depending which one you use. Fundamentally, most life eats other life to survive. Unless you're some algae, you're consuming something else to survive. Whether you're consuming meat or plants, you're consuming something in order to survive. Which means life has to eat life in order to survive. So what happens when you kill half of all life, but then certain creatures might not eat correctly? because we never learn how the snap or his personal mode of judgment works. So what happens if he kills more, say, bottom feeder life than he does, other types of higher organisms, so then way more than half dies? Ecosystem collapse can be disastrous, depending on how the snap and his plan works, which we never get too much detail other than half of all life dies. And even if it's every species loses 50% of its members evenly, roughly, which we get really not a very good argument of, but let's just say that is true, well, that doesn't really work either, because certain life forms can support way more than just one other life form. Like a tree can produce all kinds of things. It lets bugs live in it. It can produce nests and fruit or nuts. Like that alone, you take out that tree, you might be dooming a lot more than one animal to death. So you have to account for that in a way that his plan never seems to. But it gets even worse when you think about it from another logical perspective. From our view of the Marvel Universe, there's a lot of room to grow. At least, but it's kind of hard to tell, so I won't go too far into that one. However, another problem is life grows back. Like, people seem to forget this, but generally speaking, even if you killed half of, let's say, all humans, for example, within a few generations, we would be right back to where we were. And if the current human population, or alien population, or whatever, was too much, not enough resources to go around, then we'd be right back to that problem within just a few decades. And yes, stop killing half of all life may look like it would do some major fix to this hypothetical problem, but that doesn't really make sense. It wouldn't slow down growth that much, unless society collapses because, oh yeah, you killed half of all people. Remember, societies can collapse with just losing a fraction of that. And Thanos may be dooming tons of civilizations to just die, especially because a lot of them don't know the snap happened. Earth is only really aware of what happened because the Avengers told them, or Thanos told certain planets. Sometimes, how many people just turned into dust across the galaxy and no one got any clue what's going on? But that alone would cause mass panic. Like, just imagine if half all people now drop dead. There'd be panic across the streets. Society would probably collapse. At least would be in massive riots. And then we come to the biggest problem. The biggest problem is fundamentally Thanos is, well, he's not exactly moral. Even if we assume that everything he says is 100% true, with the Infinity Gauntlet, which he gets at the end, his big master plan falls apart because if his argument is, if we kill 50% of all people, there'll be enough resources to go around for everybody, well then, use that fancy Infinity Gauntlet to double the resources, or make people need 50% less resources, or make the galaxy bigger, or any number of other options of this type. Like, he could have done 1,000 different things, but he didn't. He chose death. And that's pretty messed up. Like, think about it. With the hand to snap to change anything, he chose murder rather than life. That doesn't imply a good person. Even if he had the best of intentions, well, you know what they say about good intentions? Paving the path to hell is sure what he did. And this is a slight addendum to this point, is people saying the Avengers were actually the bad guys. Now, of course, the Avengers have pretty much every reason to want to kill Thanos and undo the snap, because half of all humanity died, and their job is to protect it, and Thanos has failed to give any good reason for what he's doing. Like, seriously, we never see planets really suffering under this logic except for his home planet. Even then, we don't really know, we just know what he told us, and every insane dictator will tell you something that is convenient for his plans. But okay, we'll just forgive that. Fundamentally, people also say, well, the Avengers were bad because half all people who got unsnapped might have been in bad positions, like if they were in a plane and they would fall from the sky, or if they were next to where a building would be produced, or if they were just next to where another person was, they might still die. And yeah, that's true. Well, we don't really know how the unsnap works. We never actually see a person unsnap. So for all we know, the unsnapping like that Hulk did could somehow make sure that everyone lands somewhere safely and doesn't like explode into a wall. But even if that was a risk, first of all, those half all people seem to be in some kind of limbo state. Now remember, Hulk can't bring back the dead. He couldn't bring back Betty for Captain America, even though he tried. This implies that whatever happened in the snap was not true death, aka they didn't go to the afterlife and just get to rest peacefully. No, they were stuck in some kind of who-knows-where chamber, meaning that Thanos didn't just kill innocent people, half of all life innocent by my metric, but also is that he sent them to some kind of void limbo where they couldn't even be in the afterlife, where they couldn't even have true death and just rest peacefully. No, he put you in some afterlife chamber for a crazy plan of his. Now, you can argue that, oh, well, blah, 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 but this fundamentally shows that the Avengers needed to do what they did because they might have been, like Peter Parker, Doctor Strange, and all the others, might have been stuck there forever. And so, yeah, that's pretty bad. And ultimately, that was just a minor point, though, is how the Avengers weren't actually evil in Endgame, like some people say. Ultimately, this is all just a massive rant on my part, but it is something that bothers me. Fundamentally, Thanos was not the good guy in Infinity War Endgame. He never was. And I'm actually kind of worried that so many people seem to think he was, because he's so evil that I'm actually worried that so many people think he's good. But anyway, that's the end of the video. If you have any more points or counterpoints, please comment them down below, and I'll see you all next time. Yeah? Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscribble. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.